And so it's a great pleasure to introduce you to our fifth speaker today, and this is Amir Abo-Shaeer, and he is with the Santa Barbara Unified School District, and he's going to be telling us about his exciting work there.
All right, thank you all for your patience. I appreciate it. So I wanted to go through a little bit of background about myself because this really is a talk about people and how they engage with physics. And as a teacher, I engage with my students frequently, as like I said, from a personal standpoint. So my background degrees in physics engineering, former aerospace engineer, and then high school robotics teacher and an educational director. And you can see for 18 years, 12 years. I founded the Pueblos Engineering Academy as a brand new teacher in 2002 with the idea of bringing hands-on education, project-based learning, design-based learning to students. And so started out with only 128 students and myself, and as the demand grew, ultimately we wanted to grow the program. And so there was an opportunity in California for me to apply for a grant for $3 million for facilities construction. The catch was that it was a matching grant. And so what I did is I did apply for the grant. I was awarded that grant. We started a nonprofit foundation. We raised $3 million to match that. We built the building, broke ground, built the $6 million facility, and now in 2018 we have 10 teachers and 400 students doing this type of educational experience. This is us breaking ground, and this is the Ealing Center for Engineering Education. One of our lead donors was Virgil Ealing's physicist who started Digital Instruments. So in order to help you understand what I'm going to be talking about, I want to give you a sense of what we do at our program. I think that this is a very kind of different educational experience, and so I've got a short video here so you can get a sense of what we do.
Our goal is to create an exciting and enriching community where students experience passion for learning and a thirst for knowledge. How do we do this? By implementing STEAM into our everyday curriculum. Science, hands-on projects, state-of-the-art equipment. Year-long projects, designed and manufactured by students, demonstrate their deep understanding of multiple fields of study. Technology. Computer-aided design and programming. Engineering. A fully equipped machine shop. Students leave with 4 years of machining experience. Art. Students learn the importance of planning cohesive and aesthetic projects. Math. All the math in our engineering academy is directly applied to the projects we are working on. At the Dos Pueblos Engineering Academy, the enriching educational experience helps students develop tangible skills for the working world. Of course, none of this could be possible without the help of more than 80 volunteers and mentors from our community who bring their professional knowledge and skill into our classrooms. And hosting open houses that encourage a developing interest in engineering for the youth in our community. The DPEA enrolls more than 400 students. Half of the students enrolled in the program are girls.
So I want to talk a little about something that's really important, is the fact that I really shouldn't be here, and I want to explain that. Started out, I loved Legos and building things as a kid. I loved figuring out how anything worked, and I thought that physics would be the answer for me. I loved my physics class in high school, and I expected to go major in physics in college, and I was super excited about it. This next slide is going to not make very much sense, but this was not my college experience, and we'll get a little bit into this vignette. I went to college, and I quickly found that college and the way the classes were taught and the way the academics were and the focus so much on academics and math and applied math was something that I was way out of my depth. I had no idea that physics was going to look like this. And I struggled and I wandered around kind of aimlessly for 2 years taking classes, not doing very well on the tests and really feeling more and more demoralized. I took a year off during my junior year, and I paused and I took some general education classes because I was really thinking, what's wrong with me? Like, I really thought that I loved physics, but what am I going to do? And I started looking at other options, like, could I major in this? Could I major in this? And it came back, and it just came back that physics really was supposed to be the answer. An example of the kind of experience that I had, and that's what this quote is right here, is I had a physics class, and I was already feeling insecure about my ability to do physics. And I had a teacher who every time he would go through a proof, he would say, "It's so easy, monkeys could do it." And my immediate response, as well as the friends of mine who were also struggling in the class, was, well, we're not going to raise our hands to ask why we don't want to understand that, because if it's so easy, monkeys could do it, and we haven't even made it to, out of the primordial sludge. Now, the thing I want to explain here is this teacher, and I don't want to malign this person, really, the situation was they were so advanced in their understanding of physics, and they had become so separated from what it was to be a new person coming upon physics, that for them, they really thought that they were explaining stuff and sharing it with us, and then really trying to really build our confidence by saying, look, it's so easy. Do you see how I've just shown it to you? Monkeys can do it. But in that time, as a 20-year-old, when you've got a professor who you're afraid to kind of even maybe engage with, this was very, very disengaging and did not make us feel good. So when I came back to physics kind of junior year, I came back, and I want to be clear with this, a really weak foundation. I had not done well my first 2 years, but I was committed to trying. So I buckled down. Part of the background that you should know about me, I was working a part-time job about 30 hours a week, trying to put myself through school and major in what was ultimately, I didn't realize this, one of the more challenging majors. And so I buckled down, and I said, I'm just going to throw everything at it, and I worked 5 times harder than my peers. And I was able to start figuring out how to get Bs, and then how to get an A-, and then how ultimately to get As. But still, I was really just a chameleon. I was hiding in this world where I was looking and saying, these folks around me are not the same as me. And every day, every class that I went to, I was feeling that I was not good enough. And it's a tragedy. But here's the thing that's exciting. During my senior year, my professor, his name was Jim Allen, he took over the senior lab class, and he carried over a project. This was an ad hoc project to build a solar water heater as part of the lab class. And he said to us, whoever gets the best grade on this solar water heater, who does the best in the competition, will get an A+ in the class. Now, at this point, I was less compelled by grades. I had figured out how to do well in school. I was still struggling. It was a challenge, but I saw something that spoke to me. It was the first opportunity in my educational career, now at my 5th year, where I was actually exposed to an opportunity that connected with the way I thought. But I did not realize that I was the only one who felt this way. The other students, to my surprise later, found this project to not be something that connected with them. I remember thinking about the student who was triple majoring in math, computer science, and physics, taking 32 units, getting A's in everything, and thinking, I'm competing against this person. But you know what? I feel comfortable in this domain, and I'm going to do my best. So I showed up at the day of the solar water heater project. Actually, I want to back up a little bit. The other unique thing that I did, just in terms of seeing the world differently, we had an experiment in our lab class where we had to use an evaporator to make little mirrors. And so when I saw that experiment, we were making these mirrors to do like semi-transparent mirrors, I noticed that the bell jar kept getting covered with aluminum. There's a little tungsten boat, vaporized aluminum. And it occurred to me that maybe there was a way to take apart this entire apparatus and repurpose it so I could make larger mirrors for this solar water heater that I wanted to fabricate. Now, for those of you that are young, this was back in 1990. There was no Amazon, there was no Wikipedia, there was no internet. So going and finding, you could go right now and Google, like flexible aluminized mylar, and you could just buy what I produced. But again, as a 21-year-old, in the 1990, you know, there was, how do you find that raw material? So I proceeded to go to an architecture store. I found this film. I found the actual transparent film. I was able to transform the evaporator that was only designed to make slides this big, aluminized, and I made a 6-foot flexible mirror. And I remember walking into Jim Allen's office and saying, check out this mirror I made, kind of as like the prequel to my water heater. So I came the day of the water heater, and I put the water heater out there, and I want to give you a sense of how ad hoc this project was. The water heater contest is December 5th. We're talking 2 weeks away from winter solstice. We're doing the thing at 3 in the afternoon. I mean, the sun is like right there, you know. I mean, there's barely any sunlight. Set up the water heaters. I'm nervous, but I've put so much effort into this. Punchline of the whole thing is the water heater that I built beat everybody in the entire physics department. 15 degrees hotter than the next person, and the student who was triple majoring built something that insulated water. On that day, I was just happy. I want to be clear. I was just happy. I was excited. I was validated. But what I want to be clear about is on that day, the other student who insulated water was not having the reverse experience. That person, that student, had been affirmed over and over and over and over that they were good at physics and that they were smart and that school meshed with them in the way they thought. Whereas myself, this one experience is the reason I'm here standing before you today. I can share with you with absolute certainty that had that water heater project not been offered, that I would not have gotten the grades high enough to be able to get into grad school. I would not have had the recommendation from Jim Allen to go to grad school, and Jim Allen invited me to work in his lab after I did that. Interestingly, I built the first quantum Hall experiment, which was talked about earlier, a Dewar insert, cryostatic Dewar insert, so that students in that lab class could experience a more modern physics experiment, because prior to then, everything was very, very old in terms of the types of things we did. So, touched on that. So talents are officially recognized by the first time. Professor Jim Allen hires me into his lab. I'm introduced to the physics machine shop, something I had never even seen before. As a kid growing up, I made everything with a drill and a hacksaw, and suddenly my eyes were open to what was possible. So I applied for and was accepted to graduate school in mechanical engineering. I told Jim Allen, I asked him, I said, look, it's clear to me that I should not be majoring in physics, but I've really had a great time with this. I'd like to do a mechanical engineering project. It's something that speaks more to me, and he offered me multiple projects working in his lab to do mechanical engineering. So this is where we get to this kind of filtering and weeding concept. And as a teacher now, I've really looked to this and tried to identify how can we think differently about the way that we interact with our schools, our students in our schools. I would say that if you look at our education system, it measures and remeasures and measures and remeasures the same attributes. The student that I spoke to you about earlier, you could have known after about 1 year, this kid is cut out for theoretical physics. But for me, there was no way to ascertain what it was that I was good at. I only knew what I was not good at, which was being ready to be maybe, for example, a professor of physics, which is fine because I love what I do actually. So the idea is that we measure people the same way, we don't have enough different types of measurement, and that this filtering also happens at all levels. There's a book by Malcolm Gladwell where he talks about this, and I have personally talked to my students who have experienced this. So I have students, they'll get into an Ivy League school. They're the best student in my class. They've got 5s on everything in every AP test they've ever taken. They show up in an Ivy League school, and then they proceed to be demoralized. And I would look at that and say, why are we doing that? You've already got the best of the best of the best. And that's what you have. How can you take those students and how can you grow them and help them all to be successful? I think that anybody that gets in an Ivy League school that walks away demoralized, I mean, there's something that we're doing wrong. You've got like basically the raw talent. The other alternative you could say is, well, the metrics that we're using to evaluate the students to bring them in are not appropriate. Because if you're taking those students and they're not successful, then we maybe need to reevaluate those metrics. So either way, it calls for metric reevaluation. So I'm going to give an example. It's kind of a silly example. If you've ever had surgery or you've ever needed surgery or known someone who wanted surgery, the first thing that people start asking each other is the following, and you probably are thinking of it. Do you know a good surgeon? We shouldn't be asking, do you know a good surgeon? You've gone through K through 12, that's 13 years. You got a bachelor's degree, that's 4 more. You go to med school, that's 4 more. And now you're in 7 years of residency. I'm expecting a good surgeon. I'm expecting that we have developed an educational system that will prepare someone to be able to do that. So this is kind of my concept. Take some people. I looked online. What are the screening for getting into medical school? It's a bachelor's degree, good MCAT scores, plus training is going to lead you to be an orthopedic surgeon. That's the first clip art that came up for orthopedic surgeon. What is the orthopedic surgeon holding? Tools, okay? Nowhere in our filter system does it talk about the ability to work with your hands, the ability to think spatially. So taking this very simple example, and I'm not saying this is the answer, I'm just giving an example of reimagining the way we think about how we look at people. If I were to think about what I would want in an orthopedic surgeon, these are the qualities I would look for. Someone who has good fine motor skills, someone who is able to see how to put something together, someone who is able to do that type of thing. I would also be looking for this. I could imagine if my wrist was shattered in multiple pieces and someone was working on my wrist, I would want them to be able to put that back together with the same form factor of my original wrist. And so I would be looking for this type of skill. And so again, this is just to pose kind of a thought problem. What if the reality is that in order to get a good orthopedic surgeon so that we aren't asking ourselves these questions, what if we should be screening for people who would be good at the types of things that watchmakers are good at and the types of things that sculptors are good at? And I think we could apply this to many different things. So what I would propose is, in the same way, all these talks that we've heard, there is such an intense scientific approach in terms of how we go about trying to solve these complex physics problems. And I would argue that our educational system has not changed in 100 years. Shouldn't we all work together to have the same type of scientific approach and try to identify how can we appropriately identify talents? How can we look for multiple metrics? And how can we create a community where students feel like they're recognized and they're supported? So a couple things I want to share with you. So I became a high school teacher. I was excited to do that. I was actually in the PhD program for mechanical engineering and decided that at this point I did not want to be a professor. I went and worked as an aerospace engineer, and so I had a lot of practical experience coming in as an engineer. I went in thinking I'm going to transform education, we're going to do all this hands-on stuff, but there's a TED Talk by Ken Robinson, and he talks about how the educational system is in our DNA. And just like lockstep, I fell right into it. I became the charismatic teacher, the charismatic coach teacher, helped kids that couldn't do well in AP Physics to suddenly get 4s and then 5s, and soon the majority of my students were getting 5s, and I had dozens and dozens of students, wanting to take my class from before, when there was just very few people who wanted to do that. The other thing that I discovered, I came in from industry where there were no women. I came in from physics academia where there were no women. And I came in also from engineering academia, also no women. But when I came and started teaching, there was one thing that had changed since when I was in high school. Colleges started really looking for students to have 3 years of science. And so when I started teaching physics classes, my physics classes were gender balanced, unlike what I experienced when I was in high school or in all of my college experiences. When I started the Engineering Academy, I practiced with all the material I was going to use in these physics classes. And then the first year we offered the Engineering Academy, all I did was put the word engineering in front of the word physics. And with that one word, 2 girls and 33 boys signed up for the class. The reason that's so important and so powerful is because I knew that wasn't the way it was supposed to be. I think that we all accept the gender imbalance, the diversity imbalance, and think that these problems aren't solvable, but I was fortunate enough to be put in a situation where simply changing one word changed the entire demographics of the people who signed up for the class. I refused to accept that, and as you can see now, we have a program with 400 students. We have 50% young women in the program, and these young women are flourishing as well as the young men, and everybody is basically happy, and there's no difference in the way they approach the material. With that, I also want to talk about just the way that we even think about teaching. So I had taught AP Physics, and I was feeling really good about myself. In my second year teaching, more students got a 5 on the AP test than in the entire history of the school combined. I was feeling like I'm making a difference. Parents were applauding me. Everything was great. And then what happened is I started offering robotics at our school. I offered a senior robotics class, and I recruited all of the juniors in my class to come and do robotics with me. And this is what happened. I've got a robot sitting on a hill, and I want to figure out whether the robot's going to be able to drive up the hill, whether there's enough friction between the treads. These kids that I had taught AP Physics to, who had gotten 5s on the AP test, raise their hands, and they say, "Did we learn this last year?" Because it's not a block on an inclined plane. I mean, that's the reality. There's no practical application. So I want to show you what I think is a better way to teach physics. So this is a robot that I designed with my students for a competition called First Robotics. And the students that worked on this, it worked with all different types of learning styles. Students who could build, students who could calculate, students who could program. And when I ask you this, if you were going to have a student come into your undergraduate program, would you rather have them have a survey high school physics class, or would you rather have had them spend their time being able to do something like this, where they're actually creating something from scratch, reimagining it over and over again, and ultimately building the highest scoring robot in the world out of thousands of robots? I think that we all know what the answer is, at least I hope we do, that something like this is going to inspire people, that this is the type of thing that we would like our students to be able to do. So our program focuses, and this is a non-comprehensive list. This is just some of the types of things that we try to foster in our program: creativity, problem solving, grit, willingness to embrace iteration. That's a real hard one for kids these days, their willingness to start over, collaboration and communication skills. And so I started to work to try to develop projects beyond the robot, and also just as a testament to the fact that I really do love physics. I love physics so much that I came up with this concept called the Carousel of Physics, and worked on designing this with my students, and so I'll share with you this. This
Welcome
is
to the
a
Carousel
project
of
that went
Physics
into a
exhibit
local
at the
museum
Santa Barbara Museum
of Art.
of Art. This kinetic installation was designed and built by high school seniors of the Dos Pueblos Engineering Academy, with the guidance of their teachers and volunteer engineering mentors. The Dos Pueblos Engineering Academy, also known as the DPEA, is a 4-year specialized educational program at Dos Pueblos High School in Goleta, California. DPEA students participate in project and design-based curriculum rooted in science, technology, engineering, art, and mathematics, also known as STEAM. The vision and specifications for this ambitious project were initially conceived of in 2013 by MacArthur Fellow and Dos Pueblos Engineering Academy director Amir Abo-Shaeer. His goal was to develop a challenging and collaborative experience that was capable of engaging all 61 students enrolled in the senior capstone mechatronics class. This one-of-a-kind project, consisting of over 50,000 parts, was created from scratch during the course of a single academic school year and was completed in June of 2015. The Carousel of Physics is made up of 15 sectors in the shape of pie slices attached to a central core. Each sector was created by 4 students and demonstrates thematically related physics concepts. The entire carousel has more than 100 mechanisms that are controlled by a network of over 40 microcontrollers. Metal balls are delivered to each sector from the central core. When a sector receives a ball, it begins its physics show. The balls have 2 functions on a sector, serving as either narrators or actors, depending on the physics concepts being demonstrated. In the case of the narrator, the ball travels along a path as it makes its journey through the sector. It stops at each physics demonstration to guide the viewer through the presentation. In some specialized cases, the ball becomes a part of the physics demonstration while making the journey through the sector. In all cases, the ball is returned to the central core by the sector when the show is complete. Thank you for coming to view our project. We hope you enjoy your experience.
And so we built that project, and the whole idea was that I could engage students in everything that was physics. We went through the entire physics textbook and decided how could we get every possible experiment that was exciting, the demos that people don't normally get to see unless you take a really advanced physics class, how could we put those out in the community? And in doing that, we created something that we were able to basically use as an outreach tool and to bring in all different types of people into the tent of what is physics. So I'm a little short on time.
This sector demonstrates concepts related to waves and oscillations. The first project was created by Bella Dark. It consists of an elevator which raises and activates a double pendulum. The double pendulum has 2 hinge points, which makes its motion unpredictable. This motion demonstrates chaos theory. The next project was created by Jesse Spire. It consists of pendulums of different lengths that form a pendulum array. All the pendulums are initiated simultaneously, but because they have different lengths, they have different frequencies of oscillation. The varied frequencies allow the system to create many different wave patterns. This project also shows that a collection of single oscillators can collectively create wave motion. The third project was created by Tatiana Schloop. It consists of 169 rods that are driven up and down by cam-activated levers attached to strings and pulleys. This project demonstrates the superposition or interference of 2 plane waves. As the waves interfere with each other, their amplitudes either add or subtract. This effect can be seen when 2 water waves collide with each other and form new wave patterns.
And again, because we're late, I'm gonna push on. Some students last year, so inspired by the project that you just saw, said, what if we could do that with springs and masses? And so these 2 young women came up with the design for this, and this is actually going into a museum next week. And so, as you can see, the tuning on this is pretty incredible. The phase relationships between that, right now you can see it's perfectly off, perfectly back, going back to the waves, and then you'll see that it's going to re-establish itself with the original wave pattern. And then finally they're going to all go up and down, oscillate together. This thing will do this and stay in phase like this for about 6 or 7 times in a row, and the tuning that it took to get that to happen was pretty sophisticated. So now we get to this coming full circle thing. People come from all over the country to visit our program. They want to understand what we do. And now I have been guilty of what was done to me by that professor. People come and they talk, and because I have had it's so ingrained in my head that I'm not the champion academic, I still have a hierarchy in my mind. Like there's academics, and then there's maybe me, and then there's I don't know what the next thing is. And so when folks have come and talked to our program, I say, you know what, you're going to be fine. You can do this. I'm not that smart. And my wife was sitting with me. She's a co-founder of our program. And she said, you can't keep saying that. You're bringing all these people in. They have no idea how you've even begun to create this program that we've got here. And when you say that, it undermines everything. And so in the same way, I've replicated that with this I'm not that smart thing. But the I'm not that smart thing I need to understand is basically coming from this hierarchy of talents that we've set up. What is really the most important talent? I don't know if there is one. I think that there's a varied way to look at the human spirit and what people can offer to the community. So this right here is going to basically show you what it is we do and why we do it.
Are you excited?
Yeah, I'm really excited.
Do you guys know what it is?
Yeah, it's a carousel.
Awesome.
It shows like lots of different parts of physics.
Comes the ball. Guess how far this mirror thing goes back?
400.
But then it would go through that wall. Anybody have a guess as to how thick it is? Want to do your hand measurements? What do you think?
15 inches.
15 inches. That's pretty precise. So check it out. The sectors end right here. So it can't be deeper than here. Turns out it ends about where my hand is.
It was interesting how they moved, and then how like you can create these impossible.
I wish we had like 3 hours or something.
I liked it when the rings got the magnetic part and started lighting up, and then when it went sideways, that it didn't work.
I think that I would want to go to here when I'm a teenager.
Did you guys want to see another one, or are you ready to go home?
No.
You sure?
Yeah.
Okay. And so basically those kids right there, every one of those kids is loving physics. I mean, you heard the one kid, he's like, I want to hang out and watch these physics experiments for 3 hours. And we actually had that happen in the museum. We had it installed in the museum for about 6 months, and we had kids, like, when they knew it was going to get taken out, the family said, I had to bring my kids back. They wanted to see it before it got taken out, and they would walk around there. So every one of those kids is excited, and every one of those students could basically be blooming into something that it's untold at this point. And what I'm concerned about is how many of those kids are going to have the same type of experience as me, and will they have the tenacity that I had to stick with it despite every day feeling like I was not really worth it, or worth the time of the folks that were educating me. I think that, again, this is not meant to be a downer. This is really meant to be a call to action. It's about talking to all of you who engage with people and who are responsible for the education at all levels, to say, how can we help people feel more included, and how can we give people opportunities to share what they can bring to the whole physics picture? Because at the end of the day, I think that the value that we have of the speakers before me, who are doing this incredible research that's going to change the way that we function as a society, the value of the work that we have, where we're talking about getting people to crowdsource these biological, instruments to be able to do that, all of that's all part of the whole spectrum. And so it's my hope that after kind of listening to this and watching this, that this can be the beginning of a dialogue, maybe internally in schools, across all different grade levels, of how can we really value all the different talents, and how can we, rather than, I was in a talk earlier today, I heard a talk here where it's like sink or swim. How can, instead of having a sink or swim model, have a model where we say, if we accepted this student into our program, then it's our job and our responsibility as educators to educate them and to support them through this process and to help them make it. Because the reality is, and it's in the program, 95% of people that major in physics will not become physics professors. But I would argue that the metric we use every day in our schools is to evaluate whether or not they're capable of being a physics professor. What about the other 95%? And you can see it. There's little blurbs in there. It says, figure out what you can do with your physics degree. I mean, we should be helping people understand that while they're getting their degree. It should be obvious to anybody while they're getting their degree the opportunities that they have ahead of them. And the fact that they don't in real time have those opportunities is something that I think we need to solve, and something that, you heard the last speaker, there's folks in the other countries, they don't even have access to science. Here, all of our students have access to science, and then we turn them off. So I would just reach out and say, work with me to try to transform education and try to create a model where we can provide every single person with the opportunity to participate in science and find their place in science and find their contribution to the scientific community. So thank you. I know we're running really late, so if people don't have questions, it's all good, you know, but if you have questions, I'm happy to stay.
May I? Thank you for that's a very inspiring talk. I have two questions. The first one is when you mentioned that when people come to this robot project, people with math talent, computer talent, and hands-on talent, they can all find something to do. Then my question is, how do you define certain people? They are born to have, they are more likely to have this type of talent, and the other people are more likely to have another type of talent. Maybe some of the things, for example, math, need to be rooted down, like everybody needs enough math education and background. So that part, maybe it's not born to be like that. Maybe like we need to think deeper and figure out certain things that are universally needed. That's my first question, and I want your comment. Second is like this type of high school is terrific, but what is going to be the cost per student? I come from Bay Area, maybe the most expensive school district in this country, but like the average access to lab, to hands-on experiences, resource-wise, it's very limited still. So.
Okay, so let me answer the second question is easy. It turns out the national average for spending on secondary schools is about $12,500. The district that I operated in gets about $8,500 per student, and we raise about $2,000 per student to make that happen. That's not very hard math. We spend less than the national average to do this. It's just about mindset. So the second part of your question is you had asked about the universal skills. I want to be clear. I'm all for math, and I'm all for all of that. And we all know that physics is very, very hard. I went and majored in mechanical engineering afterwards, straight A+, super easy, messed with my brain, it was great. So I don't want to sound like I'm not academic or not for rigor, but I just want to express the fact that there are ways to think about how to measure people in multiple ways. So one of the things that we do with our school setting is that the projects fundamentally have multiple points of talent entry. So as a result, every kid is actually doing every kind of different skill in our projects, but some of them, they're feeling weak in certain areas and we support them. And in other areas, they're shining. And the ability for them to shine, and some people shine at everything, and some people shine in one thing. But the fact that they have the ability to shine and have the ability to see things that speak to them, that's what really keeps them going and what motivates them to stick with it. So I hope that answered that. Go with whatever's next.
Thanks very much for the talk. My question really was a more practical one. So that physics carousel you guys made is awesome. And I wonder what happened to it, and is there any chance it could go on loan to other places so other kids could enjoy it?
That's a great question. So that was a real crazy experiment to try to, I mean, we literally designed the thing from scratch in an academic year. I mean, it was just, hey, we're going to make a carousel. And then, 9 months later, boom, 50,000 parts all knew where they needed to be. As a result, it's a prototype of sorts. I mean, it's a one-off. And it is somewhat finicky. And we also made some bad decisions. I mean, I would say I made bad decisions as a project manager. A student said, I want to do thermodynamics. And I'm like, great. And then we try to put it in a museum. And they're like, we can't have fire. And then we had electrostatics, which was awesome. It's great. It worked. But guess what? Electrostatics, no matter how much you shielded it, interfered with the Arduinos, et cetera. So we've brought it back to our place. And we've been going through now and kind of sequentially identifying sectors that were poorly kind of thought out. I mean, it's like Rev 2, and what's going on right now is it's basically being repurposed so that we can put it out again into the world. And certainly that would be the idea, is to get it to the point where I don't think it's the kind of thing that could ever go and just sit and just run. I think it's going to go into a museum. If you've ever, there's at the LACMA, there's a little cityscape with all the cars. You know what I'm talking about? And they run it 15 hours a week, and they have a docent, a technical docent who knows how to maintain it. I think that it could easily fall into that category because we were able to run it at that level for many, many months with very limited kind of failures. Right. Was that the only question you had?
Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay, absolutely.
Hi, thank you very much for your talk today. I had two questions. The first was your first slide talked about your number of students and teachers, and it ends up working out to about 40 kids per teacher, which seems really, really big to me. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how that works. And I had the second question. So it was a talk earlier today about women in physics and like the leaky pipeline and how that happens sort of in between high school and choosing physics in college. And you're working with a step before that, middle school to high school. And I was wondering sort of what your applicant pool looked like and also how you make application decisions.
Right. I'm going to answer that, and I'm going to answer a little bit more on that question. So with regard to application decisions, we're really looking for people that are passionate, excited, want to learn, want to do all of that kind of thing. It turns out that it's really fairly easy to get to 50% women or more using even a very objective metric, because the women who choose to do this, even at this point, are still the trailblazers. And because of the trailblazers, they typically have better grades, better test scores, and all of that. So that it's turned out to be a pretty easy thing to be able to do that. What I want to say, there was something that I wanted to say in addition to what you had asked about. It was, I think it's critical for me to share with you that I basically do an exit interview with all of the young women in our program to make sure that they understand what they are about to go into. And to help them, what we do is we typically will take students to companies that are the type of companies or places they would like to go. They obviously see college as an option as well, where they could end up. And then we've got our program, and they know that that's kind of bookending what is ultimately going to be, let's just be real, probably a masculine-centric environment they're going to go into. And by prepping them with that and by showing them kind of on the front end and on the back end what kind of environments they can work on, that gives the students the motivation to be able to stick with it. And then the other thing is just kind of helping the students understand the leg up they have. So this is going to be a kind of a longish answer, but it's powerful. I've got a young woman, she's at USC majoring in mechanical engineering right now, and about 3 months into her senior year, I said, what are you thinking of majoring in? If you're familiar with a Bridgeport milling machine, it's a very large machine that cuts metal. They were in the video. And this girl, she's sitting here and she's cutting a part she's been designing. She's got metal in her hair. And the reason I say this is she's working on this machine that I didn't even see till I was a senior in college. And she says to me, I think I want to major in mechanical engineering, but I'm worried about all of the guys that I'm going to be competing with who've been working on cars in their garages. Juxtapose that against this image. I'm looking at her going, what are you talking about? She's cutting apart. She's got a print. She's just doing it with one hand, having a conversation. And I said, you need to understand, and I'm sorry that you can't see this because our program feels so normal to our students. You're like in the top 0.1% of hands-on and kind of knowledge of what it is to be a mechanical engineer. So that's that question. And the other question was the 40-to-1 ratio. Our program is not a school, it's a program within a school, and so we don't our ratios are actually on the low side. We don't have the students every period of every day, and so they're with us a fractional part of the day. And so when it comes out, what happens is freshmen, sophomore, juniors, they're in a much easier class to run. It's about 25 students per class. And when we get to the seniors, that's where really the uptick in cost goes, because we might be working with maybe 10 or less students at a time.